Welcome to the Joy of Sunflowers podcast. We release podcasts here, in part and in full, on the Joy of Sunflowers website. The Joy of Sunflowers podcast is about sisterhood through infertility and pregnancy loss. We cover a range of topics including fertility, pregnancy after loss, and so much more. I speak with a range of people, including wellness professionals, medical experts, and beautiful mamas. The aim of this podcast is to bring you information and experiences that will validate and equip you for whatever season you find yourself in right now. Hi, welcome to the Joy of Sunflowers. It's so great to have you on. Please introduce yourself and tell us your story.
Hi, my name is Jenna Sheedy. I am from the Boston area in Massachusetts, USA, and I have been struggling with infertility now for about 3 years. So at the age of 35, I noticed some perimenopausal symptoms, some hot flashes, some just signs that I wasn't quite sure where I would be at in my fertility journey were I to try to have children. So I was single at the time and started just getting some more information from doctors and people that I knew. And because I got my period very young, I was 8. I also thought that that might be an indicator that maybe I would have difficulty if it went too many more years down the road. And so I started pursuing information about egg freezing. At the same time, I started dating my current husband, but I went forward with the first cycle of egg freezing. So my first egg retrieval with Mass General Hospital in Boston. So I kind of researched a great center and a great doctor. And I was on just a normal antagonist protocol. And that protocol, unfortunately, and very surprisingly, only resulted in 3 eggs retrieved. And so that was devastating because it was kind of like all of my savings put into this. And I was naive at the time into just thinking it would work, or at least I would get some number that would be more than 3. And so we froze those 3. And then I kind of waited. That was 2019. So then I started dating my husband. I tried to wait a little bit to see what would happen in the relationship. And then COVID hit as well. So I figured, anyway, it's COVID. We're all in lockdown. And so I might as well just see where the relationship goes. And then in 2021, around kind of the spring and the summer, I decided that, I wanted to first, in the winter, I started getting my health in order. So I was really focused on fitness and nutrition and just optimizing my health for my body and for my eggs, for my egg quality, knowing that at some point in that summer, I wanted to either do another egg retrieval or make embryos with my boyfriend if he turned into my fiance. And we decided that was the route that we wanted to go. So July was when my second retrieval was happening. I had done the 6 months of like really intense work. So no sugar, no gluten, no dairy, no alcohol, like just really eating clean and healthy. And he actually proposed to me on the 4th of July, which was the day of my trigger shot. So it was an hour after the trigger shot, he proposed. And then we had the retrieval 2 days later. And unfortunately, that retrieval only resulted in 2 eggs. So between the 2 eggs that I got in that second retrieval and the 3 that were frozen, we had 5. 3 of those eggs fertilized and none of them made it to blast. And that was devastating for me. I think realizing that not only did I not have a lot of eggs, but like we couldn't even get them to this point that we were supposed to be at. And at the time, we weren't even necessarily wanting to have children right away. We wanted to kind of bank embryos. Another factor that we discovered before we got engaged was that my husband has male factor infertility as well. So we weren't sure exactly what that entailed until they did a double testicular biopsy in April. So the April before we did the retrieval, and we weren't even sure if there was sperm. So if he was able to have children. We found out he has no vas deferens. So that's also why there's actually no ejaculation. So it's great when people are like, oh, when you least expect it, it'll happen. And for me, it's physically impossible that it'll happen. So it's just the thing that people always say, like, oh, my friend, everyone knows someone, and I know people that at, 42, when they stopped trying, it just magically happened after rounds of failed IVF. But for us, that was apparent that that's just not a thing. And so we actually never have tried to get pregnant. So that's something that I've also had to grieve, like not like we went from engagement to like automatically full on into IVF, knowing I had some sort of diminished ovarian reserve and knowing that he couldn't naturally get me pregnant. We kind of had no time. And so basically our whole marriage has been cycle after cycle of IVF. He sometimes says that it's like having a pregnant wife who's never pregnant, right? I've been on like some sort of hormones and some sort of ups and downs, from his perspective of just like you're walking on eggshells with this hormonal, emotional woman. And that's been basically our entire marriage. So we're dealing with male factor and my diminished ovarian reserve. So I think after that failed attempt at making embryos, I really took a little bit of a step back. We got married. So we got married that summer, like did a little COVID ceremony. And then a year later, this past September, we had our bigger wedding. But we waited until February actually of 2022 to do our next cycle. So I again worked on I let myself go for a couple months. I was grieving and kind of like, I don't want to deal with this. I just want to like enjoy the summer. And then there's the guilt of having let yourself go. And so then I got back into doing all the healthier things to try to get my egg quality going and all the supplements. And I do acupuncture. I've been doing acupuncture for almost 2 years now. So I definitely was trying to do everything I could think of. But I think I was in a pretty negative headspace as well at the time. I think it starts becoming all consuming. And that's where I was February of last year. And so I did my third egg retrieval with Mass General. So my second was a microflare Luprin protocol, which is often something that works better for poor responders, which is what they considered me after my first retrieval. And that still resulted in only 2 eggs. So we went back to an antagonist protocol with I think we did some estrogen patch priming ahead of time. And that retrieval also resulted only in 2 eggs. So by that time I realized I don't think that Mass General is the place for me. I think I felt like it was like a factory for IVF. Like there was just so many doctors and so many people coming in and out that my case wasn't able to be a little bit like out of the box, where we could actually come up with some solutions and maybe some protocols that would add things in that could potentially help get to better results. Because my follicle count was always much better than what we were retrieving. So I didn't have amazing numbers, but I always had 15 to 20 follicles. So it would seem that at least, 10 or so eggs should be able to be retrieved. And then we just weren't getting anywhere. So I decided to change clinics. And February was when I created my Instagram account. So that definitely, I don't know, somehow before I had never even considered social media, like looking into social media for infertility. So I went through the first 2 cycles completely on my own without even like looking up information, or it's just so interesting to me now because it's such a part of my world that I didn't even think about it before. And really the reason I started the account was because I had met in talking to other people, like in the real world, because I'm a very open and vulnerable person, I end up talking to the woman who's the esthetician who's waxing me and like the hairdresser, just whoever. And then people start sharing their stories and you realize wow, there's a lot of us that are going through this. And at the same time, I was struggling a lot in my faith. So I come from a Christian background. I believe in God. And so my faith was something that I wanted it to be getting me through. And I wanted to share that because when I started having really bad results and the terrible things that are happening, there's that moment where you're just on the floor and you're convulsing and you're just so emotional. And to think I had my faith that was kind of getting me through, but I was hanging on by a thread. So I was I don't know how people do this without having a community, and so I started the account because I wanted to be able to share my journey and share my faith and share the very real ups and downs and be raw. And I didn't think I could do that. I've had my normal social media accounts for many, many years, and I have clients and friends and just people that I wouldn't necessarily want to be sharing some of this stuff with. And so it felt safe. it felt like a safe thing to do. And it's become like a lifeline. I think also just being able to use that to get support, to talk to people through all the different things going on. A lot of what I've done for my protocols have come out of things that I've talked to people about. You get just such a bigger community of like, that's why we need events like this. And that's why we need each other. It's because we learn from real people. The Google like trap of just going down the rabbit hole can lead you to so many places that aren't even productive. But when you talk to real people who've had similar situations, you can troubleshoot a little bit. And I found that incredibly helpful. And so actually I was in a community of like women in Boston going through IVF. Someone saw me on Instagram, was like, oh, you're from Boston. There's a chat with like a group of us that are going through IVF in Boston. I'll add you to it. And in there, and as I was doing research on other clinics, I found a doctor in a clinic I was interested in. And the women in that chat were like, half of them had switched to my doctor from either where I was or other places around that I had also considered. And they were singing my doctor's praises, and they were really having a lot of positive input. And so that's how I picked my clinic.
Yeah. Right.
And so then I switched, and I have not looked back. The admin at my clinic is a little bit crazy and difficult. I miss Mass General for that for sure, but there's only 3 doctors. And so I find it much better because they all know all the cases, and I've had now retrievals with all 3 of them, but they're all wonderful. And the likelihood of getting your doctor is a lot higher when there's 3 as opposed to 10, which is what the situation was before. I never saw my doctor in the 3 retrievals that I had. Whereas I'll have my doctor come in for like an ultrasound now, like if he's on call, he'll just step in and then I get to see him and talk to him in person, which is just a nice thing when you're just so anxious about how things are going and wanting some reassurance. And so that's what we did. We switched, and then that was February. And so April was my first cycle with CCRM. And we changed some things up for my protocol. The other thing that I noticed, I had a call with this doctor, my current doctor, Dr. Steyer at CCRM. I had a call with him, and then I had a call with another doctor at another hospital in Boston. So also like very renowned clinic, very well-rated doctor. And she had gone through my whole file, but it was a hospital that's connected to Mass General. So she also knew my doctor. And of the 2 of them, one was basically like, this is just your genetics. This is just the way it is. You've got all these dreams of genetic testing and banking embryos, but that's just not your situation. You should just transfer a day 3 embryo. Like she just was kind of like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to give you Disney World, which is what it sounds like you want. I'm giving you reality, and this is what you have to deal with. And that was really depressing for me. And when I talked to Dr. Dyer, his perspective was, obviously you have some diminished ovarian reserve. Like that's clear from the results that we have. We can't promise or imagine you would get like 20 or 30 eggs or something like the numbers that you see sometimes. But I think we can do better. I think we can get even 8 or 9, like even if we get a little bit more, I think there's potential here to do better. There's things we can try. Hope is not lost. And so I felt hopeful for the first time in a really long time. Like there are things we can try. I'm not done. Like I've only had 3 cycles. I haven't tried that much in terms of protocols. There's a lot of things I've been reading about that other people are doing I haven't even heard of. And so that was when my CCRM journey started. And my first cycle, we did some estrogen priming. And then we ended up adding into just the normal gonal and menopur. We added in dexamethasone and Clomid to help like my brain react with my follicles to get more follicles growing, and it worked. So I was having my follicles were growing quickly, but I had more follicles growing than I've ever had. And so we actually ended up retrieving 12 eggs. So when you've got 3, 2, and 2, all of a sudden getting 12, and all 12 were mature, and 11 of them fertilized. So it was the first time in my, the whole process where every appointment I wasn't leaving sobbing because I was so disappointed. Like I was crying happy tears, and I was just looking forward to the retrieval. And 11 fertilized eggs was a really good number for me. I got 3 blasts from that. And out of the 3, none of them were normal. And so that was really hard because I think I was so convinced that like, this is going to work. This time it'll work. And it didn't. But it was just like, okay, well, something worked more than what we'd done before. And then for our second cycle, which was this past July, I also did a bunch of different things. I started the egg quality diet. So I got a little bit more specific and like upping my high healthy fat content. So I eat a crazy ton of avocado and ghee and coconut and whatever I can get that is a healthier fat and a lot of protein. And then all, like grass fed, wild caught, like just really high quality food. My husband calls it the expensive diet.
Yes.
Because it's drinking bone broth like a crazy person and all the supplements and things. I also, this is kind of funny. I was in Europe for work for 3 weeks of the prep time in May. And I was actually visiting in Poland with a Ukrainian woman from our church she's a refugee. She's from Odessa. So she was in Warsaw and she went through IVF and she swore that the thing she thinks helped her last cycle of IVF work was leech therapy. So in Ukraine, it's a very common, in Russia, it's this very common thing. Yeah, actual leeches. And so at that point, I'm like, I'll try anything. Like, sure, let's go find some leech therapy. So that's what we did. So in Warsaw and for Germany, I actually did 2 sessions of leech therapy in May while I was away before. So who knows if that helped, but I was like, I think that's just a testament to how we literally will try anything if we think it can help us get closer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that motherly thing in us. It's like anything it takes, anything I have to do. You want to suck my blood, little leeches? Sure. If that's going to help me, then I will try it. I'll try anything. Yeah. So that was an interesting part of my, and I'm on a work trip too. So I was like going away and then I've got like bandages and I'm like going through leech therapy while I'm like in and out of work meetings. Oh, no. So that was an interesting experience. But the funny thing is, so we did the cycle, we swapped letrozole instead of Clomid for that cycle. So we kept everything else the same. And my follicles grew at a slower rate and there was less of them. So we ended up with 10 eggs and 7 were mature. And we got 2 embryos. And out of those 2 embryos, one of them was normal. So we got 1 normal and 1 inconclusive. So it was the first time in 5 cycles, that and all those cycles before that I got good news that we actually had something that was usable. And so that was also, you're not used to having good news. That's like that feeling that like there's the crying of relief that like I just don't know how much more I can take if it doesn't go well. So just the fact that there's this one chance and that it can work, right? I could keep doing more cycles as long as I knew it was possible to get a normal embryo, because when you keep going and going and going and you have nothing to show for it, you start questioning, like, should I keep doing this? Is it even possible? Am I crazy to like keep trying? How much more can I? And then people ask you, how many more, times you're going to do this. But now that we got one, I know it's possible. And so it makes it easier to like keep going. And so then we took a break. We had our big wedding in Italy in September. We had our honeymoon. We did like all the things. I definitely was like probably the most stressed I've ever been between like wedding planning and planning a destination wedding with a bunch of Americans during a pandemic was not, while going through IVF was just also very challenging. And I think IVF consumed so much of my life that I really didn't get to dedicate to the wedding stuff until it was like done. But that was also like a month and a half before the wedding. And so I had a lot of crunch time. And so I wonder if between the stress and the travel and I wasn't eating before the wedding because I was stressed. And then by the time the wedding happened, I was in Italy and eating everything I could find and all the pasta and all of the wine. And so then we came back and we went right into our 6th cycle. And and we did the same exact thing as we had done the one before because it worked. And so we just kept it the same with letrozole. And unfortunately, we did not have a great cycle. So that just happened this past month. We got 7 eggs, only 4 were mature, only 2 fertilized, and neither of them made it to blast. So that was a couple of weeks ago, and that was really sad. That was really hard. I think when you go through this so many times, you just kind of learn how to pick yourself up and keep going. I think having the community and knowing I'm not alone and talking to so many women helps. I also think some people have a really hard time seeing other people have good news. It really helps me because it helps give me perspective. Because for all of the tragedies that so many of us go through, like there's just so much loss. Seeing the miracles and the good stories come out of it, that it can work, that it does work, it kind of keeps me going in a way. Like it helps the perspective of like, there's people who've gone through a lot worse than me, and there's people that have made it and have gotten the miracles and the dreams do come true. So I'm just kind of in the middle of it, and that helps keep going. And I guess I assume I'll know when it's ready to stop, when I'm ready to stop, or when it's time. So right now, because my clinic, it's also crazy expensive to do IVF so many times. And we had finally reached, there's so many out-of-pocket costs that go into this. There's so much invested with our insurance. We finally reached our crazy out-of-pocket and our crazy deductible costs. And so I was like, great, we could do one more cycle this year to try to save a little bit of money. And then I found out that the clinic is closed for 2 weeks at Christmas. And so, and that would just be, it's like when I would have to do it. And so we decided to wait. And instead of doing it in January, I'm actually going to wait till February. I'm traveling in March anyway. And so the thought was I would have March as a month off. I could do February and then April, but I'm going to spend, because who knows if the diets help, who knows what really will do it. And if it's not just like a freak thing that like, I got the one normal embryo and I don't know why that happened, but I do know there's an immense amount of guilt I felt this last time, and the questioning, like, is it because I was too stressed, or I wasn't sleeping, or because of what I was eating? I wasn't on the egg quality diet. And again, I don't really know what the reasons were, but I do know that I already put so much on myself after a failed cycle, and I already questioned so much that at least if I do all the things, I can say, okay, I did everything. Like it didn't work this time, but I know I did everything. And it's like one less thing for me to worry about, having to overcome the like guilt of what should I have done different.
Yeah.
So I just take the 3 months to get because, it takes 3 months for your cells to like regenerate and stuff. So I'm doing acupuncture once or twice a week. I found a prenatal chiropractor. I just had my first session with her today. She's amazing. So we had like a couple hours, and she did x-rays and scanned my back and saw some areas of actually that she said were problematic. And they're the areas that are supplying blood to the ovaries. So that was an interesting thing that I had never considered. So I'll be seeing her regularly. All the supplements, obviously. I also cut the Saluma Pro for the light therapy. So I've been doing that daily. I've been using the acupressure mat daily. So trying to do everything that I can to just ensure that I can at least say after the next cycle, like I gave it my all, and then it's up to God, like whatever happens, whatever next. I'm really trying to also do ovarian PRP, so platelet injections. I have an appointment right now. They don't have another opening until the end of January just for a consult. So I'm not sure when in this process that will come through, but that's kind of where we're at.
I really hope you enjoyed the first part of this podcast. If you'd like to listen to the rest, please visit thejoyofsunflowers.com. Please note that all speakers, including experts and professionals, express information, views, and opinions that should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical conditions. If you have a medical issue, please consult a qualified professional. Speakers voice their own views, opinions, and conclusions, and they may not reflect the views, opinions, and conclusions of other speakers. Ella Rose, The Joy of Sunflowers, and its sponsors may not endorse all or any of the views, opinions, or conclusions expressed.